Welcome back to Face the Nation. We continue our 2020 political panel, and I want to start with you, Caitlin. You had Bernie Sanders, the senator, on this show saying that a woman he knows, Lucy Flores, who's a Nevada politician and has in the past endorsed, he has no reason not to believe her allegations of inappropriate touching that she says were made in 2014 by the Vice President Joe Biden. Does this become disqualifying for him? He has not officially yet declared he's running.
Right. Well, I think it shows the perils of waiting and lingering about making a decision about whether to get into this race. The longer that he waits out there, the more scrutiny is applied to him and his record, especially as these voters are getting a look at all of the other options that they have available to them. It also shows this kind of contrast that Biden will be faced with within his own party, a party that has been dramatically changed in the era of Me Too. I will say that I've been reporting in New Hampshire, in Iowa, and South Carolina, following all these candidates. And every time I ask a voter about what they think of Joe Biden, almost to a T, they say, I love him so much, I just don't want him to run. And part of that is that they feel kind of personally invested in his legacy, and they know what a presidential race could do to him, and they want him to be a player, but not necessarily inside. Now, he does have high name recognition. He was the vice president to a very popular president for Democrats. So that's why you're seeing him lead the polls. And there certainly is time for him to make a real campaign. But I think the response to this shows that he doesn't have a campaign operation ready to go and operating to respond to these kinds of attacks. So that's what leaves open those questions.
Kellyanne Conway, counselor to president, called it the worst non-rollout of the 2020 campaign when she was on television today. I want to play one soundbite from the vice president as he tried to gesture towards something in his legacy that may become a problem in 2020.
A bunch of white guys hearing this testimony in the Senate Judiciary Committee. So when Anita Hill came to testify, she faced a committee that didn't fully understand what the hell it was all about. To this day, I regret I couldn't come up with a way to get her the kind of hearing she deserved, given the courage she showed by reaching out to us.
Ed, he was chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee that ran these hearings.
Exactly. So he's
describing himself as kind of powerless.
Right, which, you know, has been relitigated ever since. And there are a lot of people in the party, certainly a lot of women who are involved in party politics these days who say it should have been handled differently. And there's a lot of people wondering, is he going to apologize away his entire Senate legacy over the course of this campaign? Because a lot of what he did and said back in the day doesn't sync with what the Democratic Party is. His behavior, his policies, his hours of Senate floor speeches, his votes on different bills. He's going to have to spend the entire campaign, particularly the entire primary at least, relitigating all that. And you wonder, really, does he really want to stomach that? But this situation with Flores, what's telling, she was asked this morning elsewhere about this and whether politics were involved. She was a supporter of Bernie Sanders. She was at a Beto O'Rourke rally this weekend, and she said flat out, yes, it does, because we're in the midst of a reckoning in our party and trying to determine who our nominee should be. There have been examples of this his entire career, and it's never been seriously discussed, and he hasn't been held to account for it. We know all the instances of, women at a restaurant, the daughters, granddaughters, and wives of senators he was swearing in on swearing-in day at the Capitol, things he's done and said that were sort of seen as, oh, that's Uncle Joe being Uncle Joe. Well, up against the party that now exists and the activists who will fill those arenas and those coffee shops and be the most active on the street in these early primary states, you wonder whether people are really going to want to have to justify and explain that to voters and how much of an issue it might become.
Does experience become something that hurts him rather than helps him?
I don't think experience per se, but I think Biden's particular position in the Democratic Party in the 70s and 80s and 90s hurts him. He was sort of a very centrist Democrat, and on crime and on drugs and on economic policy, he was with the center, even the conservative part of the Democratic Party, busing. And so in a present moment where an otherwise liberal senator like Kamala Harris faces intense scrutiny about her criminal justice record, where the previous Democratic nominee for president, Hillary Clinton, basically had to apologize for the Democratic Party in the 1990s to make her way through the primary. Biden, I think more so than even Hillary Clinton, exemplifies the Democratic Party of the 90s in its bad and good, and that is going to be his burden
Jamal,
going forward.
Mayor Pete Buttigieg had the most Google searches than anyone else in the field last week. So do we go from the well-established name to the unknown? I mean, is that where we have to kind of start from scratch?
Well, listen, I think Mayor Pete Buttigieg is going to be the factor on the debate stage that we will all be talking about afterwards. I mean, he's somebody who is willing to say what he thinks. He's the youngest person running, but yet he seems to be among the most mature. He's coming at this with values. He's putting policy on the table. He's a very strong campaigner. I think for Vice President Biden, the danger I think a lot of people see in him is that this presidential experience may take away all the luster he built up over the time that he was vice president to Barack Obama, which would then remove him from being kind of a statesman for the Democratic Party. He could run a campaign, he could win, it could all be fine, or it could be a big disaster.
And I think when you look at the two, Biden and Buttigieg, this boomlet that he's having shows that there is no front runner in this Democratic field. It's pretty amazing that you have a former vice president, a popular former vice president, who hasn't cleared the field. And you're seeing other candidates, Bernie Sanders among them, Beto O'Rourke, raising a vast sums of money on a grassroots level. And it allows for some of these other candidates, lesser known, to try to make an impact that way because there is no clear front runner and voters are trying to assess. We'll get a better idea of that with the fundraising numbers that are coming out, especially as the party is very much focused on these small dollar donations.
Right. The fact that big dollar donations, corporate donations are becoming a political problem for Democrats.
Right.
You can't take them, I think, will be a big limiting factor on the field going forward because there's only so much grassroots support available total for everyone to take in.
And we should, the reason that it's become an issue is because there's now an incentive to get as many donors as you can. There's literally a need if you want to participate in the debates. You got to hit 65,000 donors in 20 states or get 1% in at least 3 polls. A lot of candidates see the 65,000 in 20 states as an easier hurdle early on, and it incentivizes grassroots organizing and support and gives you credit with voters saying, look, I went out and found my tens of thousands of people. You have helped me get to this stage. Versus several candidates who've had to spend this past week, especially behind closed doors.
And we may not have seen all the candidates, as we've said. Biden
Right.
has not yet declared.
Right.
Terry McAuliffe, still a name floating out there. Stacey Abrams this week, Jamal, was asked about the idea of her being on the Biden ticket, and she said, you don't run for second place. It seemed to be kind of rebuffing this idea. But is she going to get in? I mean, how big does this field get?
I mean, it could get very big. It's still very early in the process, and so there's probably space for someone like Stacey Abrams. There's probably space for other candidates. But I do think that as time goes on, as there are debates, as there's more fundraising, as all the barriers and hurdles start coming up for progressing, I think this field will shrink considerably. The fact that Beto, that Senator Sanders, that Senator Harris are the 3 candidates who've been able to really take in large hauls, to me at least suggests that those 3 at least have a very durable base within the party that can expand. Everyone else I'm not entirely sure about.
The president saw the Mueller report as a victory for him on the campaign trail. Are Democrats pretending it didn't happen?
Well, Democrats have been saying since 2017 and lead up to the midterms that they wanted to focus on issues, mostly because the Mueller report, the conclusions at that time were unknown. And we saw health care as the top issue for Democrats in the 2018 election. It helped them to win back, 40 seats and eventually win back the House. They saw the president's unlikely pivot to health care as a welcome move from the president. And they believe that this is a winning issue for them. And it also removes some of the pushback or criticism that they would have been getting from Republicans who were kind of really eager not to talk about their own health care plans, but to harp on the Democrats' plans. You talked to Bernie Sanders earlier about Medicare for All, which has become kind of a baseline for entry, some kind of acceptance of a national health care system, universal health care, as a baseline for entry for Democratic contenders. Republicans wanted to point fingers at them, not to go back to their own policies, which they haven't been able to show the public that they can coalesce around a plan.
We're going to have to leave it there. Caitlin, good to have you on.
Thank you so much.
Good to have all of you. Jamal, don't leave. Stick around. We'll be right back with more analysis of the week that was and the one that's about to begin. For some analysis on the rest of the week's news, Jamelle Bouie is back with us. Kelsey Snell covers Capitol Hill for NPR. Jonah Goldberg is a columnist for the Los Angeles Times and a senior editor at the National Review. And Anna Palmer is a senior Washington correspondent for Politico. Jonah, let me start with you. The president surprised his own party with this announcement that healthcare is going to be the new party identity, but then he went back to one of the sort of most, I don't know, go-to line for him on immigration, bringing up again that he's going to potentially shut down the border this week. How do you do that without damaging the U.S. economy? What does that look like?
Well, I mean, I know it's shocking that message discipline isn't the word of the day for the Trump White House. I think that part of the problem, you can't shut down the border without hurting the economy, even though President Trump tweeted or said yesterday that because of our trade deficit with Mexico, we would make money by shutting the border, which doesn't scan. I think part of the problem is the White House has been President Trump has been wanting to message the crisis of the border as basically a scene from a Chuck Norris movie where the people are coming in to, rape and pillage the country. And that's how he's wanted to describe the crisis. Democrats have not wanted to give him any credit for the fact that there actually is and the media too, I have to say, credit for the fact that there actually is a crisis at the border, but it's not the crisis of the drugs and the guns and all of that. It's a humanitarian crisis. Right. And so you have this sort of cross-messaging going on where the situation down there is very, very dire. Added to the problem is that while I'm sympathetic to the idea of more border security, a wall isn't what's going to solve the actual crisis that's going on down there. That requires a change in policy, a change in law. And so none of the messaging is lining up with the reality on either side.
And Customs and Border Patrol, Homeland Security said this week 100,000 migrants in this month alone. Yeah. 60% of them children and their parents. How do you respond to this idea that credit's not being given to a real crisis at the border?
I think the problem is that precisely because President Trump's framing is of this dire, sort of violent, crisis at the border, and he's not talking about the humanitarian aspect. There's no real space to give him credit. It also does not help the president that he wants to withdraw funding to the relevant countries or aid to the relevant countries, that he is not working as closely as he could with the Mexican government to help manage the flow of migrants to the United States, that there are all these levers of policy that President Trump could take that he's either not doing or actively pushing against, which just exacerbate the problem. And I think also the extent to which he's been saying I'm going to close the border for so long, but hasn't taken any sort of step, which kind of encourages migrants, right? That it isn't as bad at the border as Trump says it is, so maybe I could take my chance.
Well, the State Department is now telling Congress that they are stopping some of this aid, which was meant to stabilize the country, to stop migrants from fleeing. Kelsey, can Congress stop the president? Bernie Sanders seemed to think they could.
There are some Democrats in particular who think there are options in front of them, but I have not heard anybody articulate what exactly that is. I think that as I talk to Democrats and Republicans, they're also worried that this could exacerbate problems with the USMCA, the trade agreement that they're trying to finalize that's already in serious trouble in Congress right now. They are worried that they're not going to be able to get the kind of support they need if the president is starting another fight with Mexico. And, there are plenty of people on both sides of the aisle who would really like to get some sort of trade stability happening with both Mexico and Canada.
And it'll be interesting to see that doesn't even have a vote date yet.
They don't.
Some have been predicting April.
It is very much up in the air, and it is very, very difficult to see how that gets worked out.
And the Mueller report, we now have at least a 4-page summary of what's in it. This has become even a fundraising mechanism for the Trump campaign. They're raising money off of T-shirts with Adam Schiff, the House Intelligence Committee chairman, on them, sort of mocking him and saying all of this is a conspiracy against the president. What does this all add up to? Does this continue as a storyline until we get the 400 pages in mid-April?
I anticipate this is going to be a storyline for the next several months. There's going to be jockeying between DOJ and Congress, and Democrats want more information. They want the full report. They are not backing down from that. And I also think you see the president using this clearly as a political ploy that he thinks works for him. He's been mentioning it on the campaign trail. I think that's going to continue. And this is a storyline that he's very comfortable with because he feels like he was vindicated.
What do you make of the Democratic problems here within the party within the problems within the Democratic Party? Whew. Had a hard time getting that one out. With AOC, she sent this tweet last night that some Republicans might welcome, but some Democrats felt a little bit of a discomfort with. She said, the DCC's new rule to blacklist and boycott anyone who does business with primary challengers is extremely divisive and harmful to the party. You had some other progressives kind of joining her in this. What should people at home understand about what's happening within the party?
This is basically the internal fight that the Democrats have been having in the last cycle about challengers in primary races. And you have members like AOC who want to take the party to the left, and they want to have challengers that the party establishment are not okay with. And so this is actually a tool that Mitch McConnell used on the Senate side and Republicans a couple of cycles ago to take back control. It's a way for the establishment to say, no, 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 if you're going to run for some of these more left-leaning candidates that are not in line with who we think can win these races ultimately, then you as a consultant aren't going to get the work of the party.
Jonah, is all of this just a gift to Republicans, including the shift of the messaging back to healthcare? We had Senator Scott on the program, and he's kind of was throwing the ball back into the White House's court.
Yeah, I think the end of the Mueller probe, or at least this chapter of the Mueller probe, is actually a benefit to a lot of Democrats because it takes the issue of impeachment, turns down the temperature on that. It lets them talk about things like healthcare, which are actually benefits or advantages for Democrats. And President Trump's decision to give Democrats the talking point that we're going to debate about healthcare seemed to me like an incredible unforced error. So the Mueller report is good news so far for the president, but I think it's also good news for a lot of the Democratic candidates. And the decision to pivot to healthcare seems to me an unalloyed good for the Democrats right now.
Healthcare is an issue where President Trump, I think, is especially vulnerable, not just because the administration doesn't have any particular plans, but you look at this 2016 coalition, there was more blue collar than any Republican coalition that had been before. And it depends on maintaining certain margins with blue-collar whites in certain states. And if there's an issue that's going to alienate those people from your party, it is saying, I'm going to take away your Medicaid. I'm going to take away whatever benefits you get from the Affordable Care Act. And it really is an astoundingly bad idea to make the centerpiece of your message, we're going to go with this again, when the last time you went at it, in August 2017, President Trump's average approval rating dipped to about 36%. The last time he went after healthcare like this.
And it could be a good idea if there was any policy preparation.
Right.
But there's no evidence that that's going on.
The Republicans do not want to be talking.
That's right.
Oh, yeah, that's why they keep kicking it back to, we saw Mitch McConnell say, oh, good luck working with Nancy Pelosi.
Right.
It's not something that
Which is what Senator Scott was also saying, even though the president says he and Senator Barrasso and others are going to have to come up with a solution. We're going to take a quick break. Stay with us, and we'll be back with more. We're back now with our panel. Anna, can you pick us up here? I mean, we started off the program with Bernie Sanders, someone who embraces the term democratic socialist, who is embracing government-run and government-financed health care. The president is trying to use a lot of those principles as a kind of a rallying cry for his own supporters, saying, reject socialism. It's socialism or me. Does this actually resonate?
Clearly, the president thinks it does. He brought it up at his State of the Union, and it has been doing it several times at all the campaign rallies. I think Democrats are concerned about it, though. I think, you don't see Nancy Pelosi and others wanting to carry the banner of socialism or democratic socialism at all. And I think you have this, again, I kind of brought it up earlier, but this push-pull in the Democratic Party of where you have the Bernie Sanders, the AOCs of the world, and where the Democratic establishment is, and where they think they can win in a lot of these more moderate districts and in some of these states that are going to be up in 2020, that running the Bernie Sanders playbook is not going to work.
I think there's a flip side to that as well that could be dangerous for President Trump, which is that it's not as if Bernie Sanders is calling for democratic control of the means of production, right? Like he's not calling for, nationalization and creation of state industries. He's calling for a very, very robust welfare state, for more Medicare, for free college, for these sorts of things. And things that are broadly popular with the public. And so if you're going to start defining Medicare for all, or even just Medicare expansion, if you're going to start defining free college or any of these programs as socialism, then the other thing that could happen is that voters say, hey, if this is socialism, sign me up. If this is what it means to be socialist, then I'll take that bet.
If it's described as a Nordic country and not Venezuela.
Right.
I mean, I was out in several of these majority maker districts where the Democrats beat Republicans in 2018. And I talked to voters there who say when they hear the word Democrat, they hear socialist, and they don't make those distinctions. They don't hear the policies, they hear the word. And I saw people showing up at town halls yelling. Abigail Spanberger in Virginia, out there at her town hall, you had people showing up and specifically wanting to ask her, are you a socialist? You're a Democrat? Does that mean you're a socialist? And that's not something that, moderates like her want to talk about.
Yeah, there's also just a label problem. I think it was Quinnipiac had a poll recently that showed that support among Democrats for single-payer health care is going down, but support for Medicare for all is going up. They think that Medicare for all is not socialism. It sounds like a more moderate, kind of approach. And if you look at the Gallup polling on socialism over the last 10 years, you find that basically the support for socialism is basically a referendum on the state of capitalism, right? It's just whatever, if capitalism is in bad odor at any given moment, like in the financial crisis especially, then people say socialism because it's basically, they think it's a binary thing. And the reality is I don't think there are a lot of voters out there that actually want real socialism, but they don't necessarily love capitalism right now either.
But they want things like guaranteed pre-existing conditions and maternity care and things like that.
So I think
guaranteed.
Where the danger comes in is if President Trump is citing himself with sort of unrestrained capitalism, that is actually unpopular as well, right?
Right.
And so if what you're doing is saying I'm for unrestrained capitalism and the people who want a generous welfare state are for socialism, then you might end up losing that branding game if you insist that it's the generous, recognizable policies that are the bad thing.
Yeah, the fight will be over who gets to define the terms.
Right.
And if Trump wins 51% of that argument about defining the terms, it's very good for him. If he loses it, it's very bad for him.
Kelsey, what happens when the Attorney General goes to Capitol Hill and actually gives testimony at the beginning of May, answering questions about the Mueller report?
Well, I think that it's going to be equal parts political kind of circus and a lot of information getting out there to the public that people want to understand. And I think it'll be up to Democrats to find a way to walk the line between wanting to push the political side of things and get political wins on the board on a hearing that will be widely watched and televised, and needing to establish that their investigations going forward are not some sort of the partisan witch hunt that the president talks about. It's going to be a delicate balance, and it should be very, very interesting to watch.
All right, we will be watching it, and we'll have plenty of analysis then. Thanks to all of you for joining us. We will be right back. That's it for us today. Thank you for watching. Until next week, for Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan.